The Zenbook A16 is a simply terrific laptop, and similar to the AMD-based Zenbook S16 we reviewed a couple of weeks ago, Asus put together a very well-rounded everyday notebook. Not only is the 16-incher incredibly light, especially for the screen size, but it manages to achieve the weight without any major drawbacks regarding stability, and the sand-colored Ceraluminum chassis feels and looks pretty classy. Similar to its smaller 14-inch sibling though, the star of the show today is Snapdragon's all-new X2 Elite Extreme, the fastest silicon in Qualcomm's new lineup of laptop SoCs, and it definitely doesn't disappoint and easily rivals or beats everything Apple, Intel and AMD have on offer. In addition, our sample is priced, well, I want to say almost reasonable, which is again a breath of fresh air in the current laptop market situation. But is a great chip in a very good chassis enough to bring the Windows on ARM platform into the mainstream, or do you still have to live with too many compromises when it comes to your everyday experience? Well, let's find out together, shall we? Let's get into it. Again, our sample of the A16 bets on the Snapdragon X2 Elite Extreme X2E 94100 with the same X290 GPU we just tested in the smaller A14. And in general, at least on paper, the overall differences between the regular Elite and the Extreme are limited to higher clock speeds. So it will be quite interesting what this will mean for our benchmarks. Oh, and by the way, the A16 is, to my knowledge, at least at the time of filming this video, the only laptop being announced with the Extreme. So yeah, that's that. Asus felt generous on the RAM side, and I wish we would see the 48GB config much more often, especially for more performance-focused laptops betting on integrated GPUs, since for heavier applications it just gives you a bit more headroom when dividing memory between the CPU and GPU. Asus also includes a slider in their management application that lets you allocate VRAM, by the way, just in case you want some finer control in this regard. When it comes to storage, you get a 1TB NVMe SSD with speedy transfers to store all of your files, games and creative projects. And while you can swap that one for a larger variant, there's no second slot beneath the button plate. On the display side of things, we are looking at, pun intended, the same 120Hz high-res panel we already know from the S16, and similar to that one, you can feast your eyes on the usual contrast and impressive color range. SDR brightness is solid with roughly 500 nits, while smaller highlights in HDR can reach up to more than 1100 nits. As per usual for Asus's OLEDs, factory calibration is pretty much on reference level, and the PWM frequency is also quite high for this particular screen technology. So overall, this 16-inch display is a great fit no matter if you are catching up on the latest shows, playing games or doing some color-critical photo or video editing. The chassis of the A16 is a bit of a curiosity, and I mean that in a very positive way. For the A14, the reduction in weight kind of took away a little bit of the premium feel, which you would get with something like the Zenbook S14, for example. But contrary, the A16 feels a lot more dense, more rigid, and overall just plain better than the smaller 14-incher, despite the larger overall footprint of the 16-inch. So even being this light, there's no flex on the base unit, even when applying a pretty excessive amount of force, and even the lid is more than stable enough. I also very much like this color, since it's something fresh amongst the predominantly black and gray laptops out there, while still being subtle enough to blend in. And again, this puppy is incredibly light, whether you compare it to the S16, something like the MacBook Air 15, or pretty much everything else in this form factor that offers similar performance. The port arrangement and selection is also pretty on point, with a pair of USB-C 4s, HDMI 2.1 and a headphone jack on the left, and a USB-A and a full-size SD card reader with pretty incredible transfer rates on the right. The A16 is also one of the first devices we have been able to test in combination with our new Wi-Fi 7 reference router. And well, wireless transfers are very speedy and stable, while the webcam delivers an okay-ish image without really blowing your socks off. But I mean, what else is new when it comes to laptop cameras these days? Thanks to the more rigid chassis, the keyboard feels great despite the general lack of travel, but with a pronounced pressure point and overall satisfying feel, you should hardly have any trouble here. The touchpad also does what a touchpad does and worked well during our testing. Alright, let's talk performance, and oh boy, you guys are in for a treat, especially when it comes to the CPU side of things. As per usual, we did some initial testing for an overview about the different performance modes for the A16, and things are looking pretty good here, even though the 16-incher does get quite loud when asking for everything the X2 Elite Extreme is capable of. But at the same time, even the whisper mode is still more than fast enough to compete with what others have on offer. And while performance is reduced slightly on battery, again, you will hardly have to complain about not having enough performance headroom. In Geekbench and Cinebench, and when utilizing all 18 cores the Extreme has on offer, it very much mops the floor with everything, be it Apple's M5, Intel's Panther Lake SoCs or Ryzen 400. And you would have to move up to something like the M5 Pro to get higher numbers. As per usual, Apple has a firm grip on the throne in single-core scenarios, but Qualcomm handily beats the X86 competition. Non-native benchmarks run well, but you definitely have to factor in a performance hit, and our numbers show equalized results in our overall CPU rating. System performance is excellent, and in general you are getting an incredibly snappy system and, for example, a very streamlined standby behavior, including wake from sleep times that almost rival Apple here. You will still have to deal with certain incompatibilities when it comes to more specialized pieces of software. For example, our calibration software still does not run, but everything mainstream should run without a problem, and the number of applications being available natively is still growing. And even if things are emulated, it's something you would hardly notice. I did some quick edits in Capture One, for example, and the overall experience I was getting was pretty flawless and definitely comparable to what you would get on macOS or a regular x86 Windows platform. Resolve also runs a lot better now thanks to the updated GPU, and similar to what we have seen on the A14, you will have to reduce the overall timeline resolution to get smooth 4K playback with our Blackmagic RAW footage. But apart from that, I could probably finish one of our videos on the A16 without a problem. And while we are at it, similar to the A14, the new Adreno X290 is easily doubling the scores of its predecessor and competes with Apple's M5, Intel's Lunar Lake 140V and AMD's 890M. Intel's latest higher-end Panther Lake offerings are quite a bit faster but also need more wattage. Aside from synthetics, actual games tell pretty much the same story, and supported games do run quite well with very competitive frame rates. Unfortunately, you still have to do some research which games are supported, and while the situation is improving, some games simply do not run, which for our benchmark titles, for example, includes F124 and 25. You can always check works on Windows on ARM for the titles you're playing to potentially save you some wasted bandwidth when downloading something that doesn't work. And I wish Microsoft would include a notification or something in the Xbox app, for example, if you try to download something that simply doesn't run. But again, the situation improved, and so I was able to fire up Kingdom Come Deliverance, for example, and got a pretty stable 60 FPS plus experience in 1200p and low settings. So yeah, the A16 is not really a gaming laptop and it's not marketed as such, but for some casual virtual entertainment you can definitely have fun with it. During everyday scenarios, and especially when utilizing the standard or whisper mode of the Zenbook, you are mostly dealing with either a completely silent or a very quiet laptop overall. When you push it, especially in the performance mode though, things get very audible. Please enjoy our noise and speaker samples, and if you are after additional information about the A16's stress test behavior or things like internal or external temperatures, please check out our written reviews on the website. Battery life is once again a bit of a head scratcher, since while the Snapdragon Silicon is quite a bit more efficient than Intel or AMD, and by the way, if you want more info about that, please check out our detailed analysis once again on the website. You are not getting longer runtimes, showing once again that good efficiency results alone do not always equal a better overall user experience. So while 13 hours in our Wi-Fi test aren't bad, things could also be better. And just because you're running an Intel or AMD laptop, it doesn't automatically mean you are getting less battery life. Quite the contrary, actually. Alright folks, that would be all for the A16, and I got to admit, Asus put together a fine laptop and Qualcomm did an amazing job improving up on their original X Elite silicon. That said, you still have to deal with certain incompatibilities, and while the situation is a lot less severe than it was about 2 years ago, it's still something you have to keep in mind. But for the most part, with the Zenbook, you are getting a very fast and super light machine with a great screen, generous port selection, very good inputs, and all of that combined with a competitive performance experience. But let me know what you think. Is all of this enough to make the jump to Windows on ARM and say goodbye to the x86 Windows experience we all know? Or maybe you are considering something like the A16 over Apple's latest MacBook Air 15. Sound off below. Thanks for watching, folks. My name is Alex. Feel free to leave a like and sub if you enjoyed your time with us today, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.